Hello and welcome to my kitchen. I've been looking through food diaries held at the Mass Observation Archive, which show what people were eating in Britain during 1941. It's time for more time travelling via food, and in this video I'm going to be making a salad eaten by Mrs M Clayton in September 1941. We're really lucky with Mrs Clayton's records because the papers have survived showing what she ate for practically the entire year. So the papers say that she's aged 52, she's an ex-teacher and catering for two, I'm presuming her and her husband. She's an incredibly inventive cook. In May, she says she's making cauliflower in white sauce flavoured with anchovy essence, a sort of substitute for cauliflower cheese. She also gives lots of really interesting little comments, like how the supplies are going and what there's shortages of at the shops. One of the things she says is, "My ordinary greengrocer is a great centre of morale. Tries to be very fair and his word is taken as law amongst his customers. Either raspberries or gooseberries was his rule when he hadn't enough to give both." Another entry in her documents that particularly caught my eye was for Sunday the 22nd of June, when she says she goes to see her brother and his wife down at Weymouth. She makes comments on the meal there and they seem to eat very well. She says, "Perhaps there was a bit of the fatted calf about the table. We certainly did very well. One advantage he has, a good garden and allotment." And I did notice that in a lot of the food diaries, people make reference to their own eggs or something that's from their own garden or homegrown or homemade. And of course, a lot of people during the war were turning over their outside spaces to growing fruits and vegetables. The Ministry of Agriculture's Dig for Victory campaign encouraged people to grow their own fruit and vegetables to help feed themselves and other people. Like the Ministry of Food, they produced advice leaflets and also did radio broadcasts. And local councils began to convert lots more land to provide allotments. The number of allotments across the country had risen from just over 800,000 in 1939 to around 1.5 million by 1943. Even though it maybe didn't measure up to her brother's allotment, it looks like Mrs Clayton is growing her own in her South London garden. For this midday meal in September, Mrs Clayton and her husband are having leftover cold roast beef, and with it they're having a salad. And I've got the whole recipe here, so I don't need to do any further research. The salad is made with cold potatoes, grated carrot, beetroot, cabbage, with tomatoes, parsley and nasturtium, it says, from the garden. I don't have a garden, but I do actually have parsley and nasturtiums growing on my balcony, so I'm just going to go and pick some. Nasturtiums pretty much grow like weeds in this country, so they're probably quite a good thing to be foraging for during wartime. And I've also got a tiny amount of parsley growing on my balcony, so I'm going to take this in with me as well. There are a few interesting foods that people were eating in 1941 that I'd not heard of. For example, in June 1941, Lucy Kaufman, who lives in the village of Corfe Castle in Dorset, says she's eating bracken tips on toast. These are most likely the early tips of certain kind of ferns which apparently are edible. Digging further into the archive, I found a list of wartime cookery books submitted by a bookseller to Mass Observation. One of the books it lists is a book on foraging and unconventional foods called "They Can't Ration These" by the Viscount de Mordy. And actually, I happen to have a copy of the book in my collection that I picked up ages ago. The bookseller noted that it included recipes for hedgehogs, squirrels and sparrows. And if you flick through it, there's an interesting entry here on bracken asparagus. I wonder if Lucy Kaufman went foraging with a copy of this book. In any case, I've always heard that ferns are poisonous, and when I looked this up, it did say that they do contain carcinogens, and I think that's why people only eat the very, very small tips. I still don't think it's a great idea, so I'm going to avoid those. So I've got all my ingredients here. Mrs Clayton said that she got the nasturtiums, parsley, and I think the tomatoes from her garden. I haven't managed to grow tomatoes, but I have got these really lovely ones from my veg box, so I'm going to use those. So I'm going to cut this all up and get ready to mix it all together. So here it is. I've done the cabbage a bit like coleslaw, kind of shredded it. I've grated the carrot as Mrs Clayton did. I've used fresh beetroot and I've chopped it into small bits because I really like fresh beetroot in salad, raw. It's possible she might have used pickled beetroot, but I don't know. So I've gone with raw. I've got the cold potato, I've got my parsley, my nasturtiums, my tomatoes, everything. I am going to make a dressing for the salad, even though Mrs Clayton doesn't mention one. So the Ministry of Food released a lot of different recipes for dressings. I'm going to make a simple dressing, just olive oil and vinegar. I'm not quite sure how Mrs Clayton would have arranged it. I remember when I used to have salad at my nan's, all the vegetables would just be arranged on a plate with a bottle of salad cream and no dressing. It wasn't all mixed together in the way that I guess we more often see salads now. Also, I think the colours might look nicer if I kind of layer them onto a plate. Right, so let's have a taste. And I'll just put the dressing on. Okay, so let's see what it's like. The nasturtiums, if you've never eaten them before, kind of have a really quite peppery taste. They kind of provide quite an interesting kind of flavour punch through everything else. Then you've got the sweet beetroot, and then adding cold potato to salad is actually a really nice way to kind of make it a little bit more substantial. And of course, Mrs Clayton ate this with cold leftover roast beef, and I can imagine that this would go really well with that because of the nasturtiums tasting a bit horseradishy. So there we have it. Mrs Clayton's salad from September 1941.